Hello, and welcome to Book Reviews Nobody Asked For with your host, Casey Mitchell. Today we're actually talking about, hey, before you go anywhere, I agree, as far as YouTube content goes, book reviews are probably one of the more lame things you can do. But books are not lame. Absolutely not. They're one of the greatest things in existence. Why? Well, because they're the distillation of the author's thought. And if you pick the right people to read, then you're not only just reading that person, but you're reading that every other person that person's ever learned from, who's learned from that person, and that person who learned from them, that other person. And it goes way back. Like, actually, I'll tell, this is how it goes way back. At the beginning, Frank Wilczek of A Beautiful Question, he starts writing about Pythagoras and Plato and how, through mathematics and an ideal sort of conceptual system, we can start talking about reality or what's real. So, using the conceptual domain to talk about the perceptual domain, using mathematics and integers and whatnot to explain perceptual things. So he goes into Platonic solids and, of course, a little bit of trigonometry and stuff. But there's no equations in the book at all. But that's what I mean. When he's talking about Pythagoras and Plato, he's telling you what he knows about those guys and what he learned from those guys. So you're learning. It's not just Frank Wilczek you're reading. You're reading Plato and Pythagoras, and later on Maxwell and Einstein and Faraday and Emmy Noether and just tons of people come through other people or come through another author. And that to me is what makes books really beautiful, is when you're reading them, is you're not just reading one person, but the distillation of thought or the accumulated thought of that person. And A Beautiful Question, Frank Wilczek's book, it took him 5 years to write it, and to my mind, it's his gift to humanity. It's what he thinks all of us should care about. And, I mean, you could pick a worse author to read from. I mean, the guy's a Nobel Prize-winning physicist for his work in discovering the strong force, or what's called asymptotic freedom, and how gluons, play around with quarks to confine them. It's pretty profound theory. And what it's called asymptotic freedom. I think it's kind of silly calling a confinement principle freedom, but hey, I don't get to name any of these things because I just get to read about them, and they're pretty fascinating to read about. So in Frank Wilczek's book, he takes you, it's kind of a historical scientific endeavor, and he brings you through all the way back from, like I said, Plato and Pythagoras, and he takes you up and explains Maxwell's equations for electricity and magnetism, and he moves on through all four forces and also talks about special and general relativity, and then he gets into what he calls quantum fluid theory, because he wants to, it's of course quantum field theory, but all of the entities in quantum field theory are like fluids. So he talks about the electromagnetic fluid and the metric fluid and the gluon fluid, because this is, he makes a distinction between a field and the activity in that field. So the field is the metric field, but the activity in that field is the metric fluid. And that's, of course, explained by general relativity. And a lot of symmetry. He explains symmetry in this book, which is basically change without change. He explains symmetry very well, and then talks about local and rigid symmetry, which gets a bit more difficult. But he's trying to get you to supersymmetry and the unification of all forces, which is pretty profound. And that seems to be where physics is heading. I'm really picky about the books I read now. Like, really picky, because a book is a love affair, and I think you got to pick your lovers very carefully in life, or else you might be miserable. Like, who wants to be miserable? Anyways, a book is a love affair, and it's really important to pick great books, and I would never recommend a bad book. But of course, you also have to be interested in this kind of stuff, which I feel is strange, because I'm like, why doesn't everybody wonder about the world? And a lot of people don't. And a lot of people prefer not to wonder about the world, which is strange to me because it's pretty interesting, just, looking around. Anyways, but yeah, go check out A Beautiful Question by Frank Wilczek if you want to get a really good if you want to have a really good understanding of the modern view of physics and would see the world through the eye of the physicist, especially a Nobel Prize winning physicist who's actually a super wonderful human being. Actually, don't just buy his book. Go check out his. He does a Royal Institution lecture. You can find it on YouTube. I'll put a description. I'll put a link in the description. But you're gonna want to watch it in at least 1.5 times speed, maybe 2 times speed, because he's super. I don't know, maybe he's nervous or what, but he's pretty slow. He's pretty slow chatting. I don't know if I could talk in a huge group of people like that too, though. But I mean, he's like a professor, so you think. Anyways, totally redundant. Beautiful talk, though. You'll want to watch it on 1.5 times speed at least. And but the book is way better than the talk, absolutely. And I'm sure if you're interested in the modern view of physics, you're gonna love this book. And yeah, that's about it. Hope you enjoyed this first episode of book reviews nobody asked for. And as always, thanks for watching.